As the Delphi murders case has progressed, and various prosecution and defense filings have been released, I've tried to update my spreadsheet where I keep track of things that point towards Richard Allen being guilty and things that point to him being innocent. So in this video, I'm going to review my spreadsheet as well as some PowerPoint slides where I kind of debate myself about evidence and if it shows that Rick is guilty or innocent. I still have not seen enough evidence to make a final decision, so that's why I'm waiting for the trial, which is supposed to start Monday, May 13th, with jury selection for the first 3 days. So column A on the left is titled Guilty, where I entered things that might point towards Rick being guilty. Column B on the right has things that might point towards Rick being innocent. So starting with row number 4, in the guilty column, Rick owned a gun and the girls mentioned a gun on Libby's video. An unspent cartridge matching his gun was found near their dead bodies. An analyst with the Indiana State Police stated it was cycled through Rick's gun, and the Indiana State Police tested other local guns that did not match the unspent round found next to Abby and Libby's bodies. A response showing Rick's innocence might say, it is subjective analysis that may not be allowed in court. Why did Rick have one gun cartridge in a keepsake box in his bedroom? His 2 gun magazines had a total of 17 cartridges out of a maximum of 20. So for 3 missing from the 2 magazines, 1 was in his keepsake box, 1 was next to the girls' bodies, and 1 was in his gun. I've heard that some people keep the first cartridge they ever bought after purchasing a gun, so that may be the reason why he kept that in the keepsake box, but I'd be interested to hear, what did he ever tell his wife about the reason it was in the keepsake box? Or was it something that she put in there? In the row 6 guilty column, Rick made suicidal statements at Westville. However, those statements could have been influenced by depression, solitary confinement, and frustration at being falsely known as being a child murderer. However, the accusation that Odinist guards told Rick to call his wife and confess, or his family would be killed, was a false statement the defense admitted creating. A sign of guilt may be that Rick has not sued anybody for false arrest. However, someone might not sue until after the trial, if he is found innocent. His letter requesting a public defender asked for mercy but did not say that he was innocent. However, he did not have to proclaim his innocence in that letter, only that he needed help hiring an attorney. Rick has not done any TV interviews or spoken when entering the court because he does not want people to hear his voice resembles Bridge Guy. Against this, you could say his attorneys are talking for him through court filings. Rick wore a head covering in addition to a hood to prevent people on the trail from recognizing him and any hair to transfer or fall out in case of a struggle. Bridge Guy also may have worn a scarf up to his nose, but there is no confirmation Rick admitted to wearing a similar item. People may say it was February and a high of 43 degrees, so Rick wanted to have protection from the cold, but why was he there for 90 minutes if it was so cold? Rick said he walked from CPS to Freedom Bridge along the entire trail and went on Platform 1 of Monon High Bridge and then sat on a bench between noon to 1:30. He only saw 3 girls around noon near the start of the trail. In 90 minutes, Rick, I have to take a big breath here. Rick did not see Bridge Guy, a gang of Odinists, Ron Logan, the Kleins, a 20-year-old kid with poofy hair, the mayor, Libby's grandfather, Brian Chadwell, Charles Eldridge, Daniel Nations, the pastor, the archaeology professor, or any other adult male or teenage boy. However, it could be stated that it's possible that Bridge Guy and others were hiding at the south end of the bridge or the lower 505 trail until after Rick exited. Pointing towards Rick's guilt, you could say, the defense is trying to hide everything found at his house, his October 26, 2022 interview, everything he said and wrote after his arrest while he was in prison, and Libby's video. If he is innocent, what is there to hide? Against this, you could say that is normal for defense attorneys. There is no evidence that Rick was home and not at the trails between 1:30 to 4 p.m. I would be interested to know if police ever did a geofence of Rick's house the entire day. We'll have to wait for the trial to hear more details about what he was up to that day. The final thing I have here pointing towards Rick's guilt, law enforcement spent 5.5 years looking into 70,000 tips and other suspects. Yet, nothing produced enough evidence to charge someone until they looked at Rick in September 2022. Against this, you could say, if law enforcement was incompetent and did not follow up on Rick's 2017 tip, what other tips did they not follow up on to maybe find another or the real Bridge Guy? In this section, I'm going to review items that point more towards Rick's innocence. So I'm going to start in the column B on the right under innocent. During their August 2023 depositions with the defense, Tony Liggett testified there is no DNA linking Rick to the crime scene, and he is unaware of anything that links Rick to the crime through his phone, computers, or electronics. Jerry Holman testified none of these link Rick to the crime scene or murders. DNA, data from Rick's phone, data extracted from Libby's phone, connection to other suspects, social media, Rick's computers, or fingerprints. In the left column, I wrote, at first, McClelland charged Rick with being bridge guy, and then in January 2024, he added new charges stating that Rick was also the murderer. We'll have to wait until the trial to see what evidence he will present. Another thing pointing towards Rick's innocence, he came forward to police within a few days of the murders. Against that, you could say, he had to, or else he risked the 4 girls going to Rick's work at CVS and recognizing him as the man they passed around 1:30, and it would look bad if he never came forward. Maybe he also turned to look at witness 4 while standing on platform 1 and was concerned that she or the 3:57 p.m. driver could identify him. It's unknown if that was Rick on 300 North at 3:57 p.m. wearing a light-colored coat. Against that, you could say, why hasn't that other man been identified or come forward? This next one is personal to me. I don't see Rick's face stand out in the bridge guy video. However, the video is too blurry to make out any facial features, so it's not that easy to identify who it is. Also, I don't hear Rick's voice as a certain match to bridge guy. However, we don't have enough high-quality voice samples of Rick. A few other things pointing towards Rick's innocence. One of the 4 girls said bridge guy was, quote, not bigger than 5'10", end quote. And the wanted poster listed bridge guy's height as between 5'6" to 5'10". Rick was 5'4" or 5'5". Also, the wanted poster listed bridge guy as 18 to 40 years old and Rick was 44. Against this, I do think that bridge guy's body type and small feet are similar to Rick. Rick admitted wearing a head covering and hood, which can add up to 4 inches to someone's height. Also, one of the 4 girls may have described bridge guy as having gray in his hair, so he could have been 44 and had similar hair to Rick. Also, there's been a rumor for a few years that an online sleuth sent a photo of a local sex offender named Jimmy Dale Duvall to the mother of the girl who passed bridge guy and said hi to him near the start of the trail with the 3 other girls. Allegedly, that girl said to her mom, yes, the guy we passed did resemble Jimmy Dale Duvall, who in my opinion does resemble Richard Allen. Apparently, Jimmy Dale Duvall has an alibi for that afternoon. And finally, none of Rick's family, friends, customers, or coworkers recognized the body shape, blue jacket, jeans, or voice of bridge guy, and some of them knew that he wasn't at work that day. Against this, we don't know how many people called in tips about Rick. Maybe some people thought things about Rick matched bridge guy, but they thought Rick was too small and kind to commit this crime. For this next section, I'm going to review 8 PowerPoint slides I made where I do more of a deep dive on some of these issues. I'm going to try and go in somewhat chronological order. So I'm going to start with Rick's 2017 interview with a conservation officer. It is unknown if Rick called the Delphi police, Carroll County Sheriff, or the tip line after it was set up on February 16th, or if he never called and just walked up to a conservation officer at the grocery store. If he did call, like the defense stated in their December 2022 press release, did the person who answered that phone call write down any notes showing if Rick told the person on the phone what time he was on the trail that could clear up confusion about the noon to 1:30 and 1:30 to 3:30 timelines? According to the conservation officer's notes, Rick was on the trail from 1:30 to 3:30. We'll have to wait until the trial to hear why he wrote this time frame while talking to Rick. The PCA states there is a car matching Rick's heading to CPS at 1:27, which goes along with the later 1:30 to 3:30 timeline. The tip stated he parked at the old Farm Bureau building and walked to the new Freedom Bridge. If I had to guess, Rick said he parked next to an old building next to Hoosier Heartland Highway, and the conservation officer mistakenly thought it was an old Farm Bureau building, not Rick. In 2022, Rick said he parked next to an old building. There's only one old building near the start of the trails, and it's CPS. While at Freedom Bridge, he saw 3 females. This would have been around 12:05. If this was a lie, Rick is screwed. Police know if there was a group of 3 girls around this time at this area. One was taller and had brown or black hair. So, does this match one of the 4 girls who passed Bridge Guy in the same area around 1:30, showing that Rick was partially honest about who he passed, but lied about the time and the number of girls? He walked from the Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge. He did not see anybody, although he stated he was watching a stock ticker on his phone as he walked. So, what evidence will be presented that Rick even cared about financial stocks enough to want to look at how stocks were performing that afternoon? His phone would have to connect to a network to get the latest updates. So, what did Rick's phone and the geofence data show about any possible app usage related to stocks, and at what time was he doing that? What did Rick's phone show him doing the entire day? He stated there were vehicles parked at the High Bridge trailhead, which is the Mears parking lot, however, did not pay attention to them. So Rick said he saw more than one car parked at Mears, but in 90 minutes on the trail, he did not see the adult owners of those cars. Things that make you go, He did not take any photos or videos. I guess maybe because the water in Deer Creek was too dirty to take photos of fish. The conservation officer wrote potential follow-up information. Who were the 3 girls walking in the area of Freedom Bridge? From early on in this case, law enforcement said they knew everyone on the trail that day except Bridge Guy. If there was not a group of 3 girls near the start of the trail around noon, Tony Liggett knew that Rick lied during his October 13th, 2022 interview, and that's a major reason he was arrested, even though the PCA did not confirm whether or not there was a group of 3 girls around noon who described passing someone matching Rick. The defense filings have never referenced obtaining a list of everyone on the trail that day. Maybe it has never been turned over. But if there was a group of 3 girls near Freedom Bridge around noon, why hasn't the defense brought them up in the first Frank's memo and sequels Frank's number 2, Oops, We Forgot Stuff, number 3, Frank's Further, and the latest number 4, Return of the Franks? Next up is something that's extremely important. A group of 3 girls and a group of 4 girls. Things about this that point towards Rick being guilty. At 12:43 p.m. on the day of the murders, a girl in a group of 4 took a photo of Monon High Bridge, and they did not see Rick as they walked the entire trail to the bridge. Between around 1:15 to 1:30, these 4 girls likely walked from the 505 trail, which goes all the way down to the creek, and then came back up and passed the Mears intersection on their way to Freedom Bridge and did not see anyone on the trails. At 1:26, 2 sisters had their photo taken on bench 2. In 2022, Rick said he went to platform 1 and then sat on a bench, but the PCA did not specify which bench or for how long he sat there. If Rick was sitting on bench 1 until 1:25 and then walked 3 minutes to his car at CPS, the juveniles would have likely seen him as they approached benches 1 and 2. They did not see anyone until they passed a man around 1:30 to 1:35, matching Rick and Bridge Guy on his way to Monon High Bridge. Rick and Bridge Guy both wore similar jeans and a dark jacket. Their heads were covered with a hat and hood, were described as being in their 40s to 50s, and were short. So one guy matching that description leaves CPS at 1:30, and the other guy pulls into that same unusual spot within a few minutes? I don't know about that. That's a heck of a coincidence. Pointing towards Rick's innocence, maybe Rick saw 3 girls who have not been identified publicly, and he left from a bench to his car around 1:15, so the group of 4 girls did not see him at 1:26. However, this does not explain how 4 girls walked the trail past all 6 benches twice until Monon High Bridge and back and did not see Rick. These 2 groups, one with 3 girls who Rick said he saw around noon, and another group of 4 girls who were on the trails at least between 12:30 to 1:30 when they passed a man resembling Bridge Guy, may be what proves Rick lied about the noon to 1:30 timeline. One of the 4 girls took a photo of Monon High Bridge that is timestamped 12:43 p.m. It seems as though Rick was not on the bridge in that photo, and these girls did not see him on the trail or sitting on any of the 6 benches as they walked the 15 minutes or so from Freedom Bridge to Monon High Bridge, so where the heck was Rick? I uploaded a video that's about an hour long where I kind of did a deep dive on this whole issue of Rick's timeline from noon to 1:30. It's titled, How Did Richard Allen Not See the 4 Girls and Bridge Guy? And it goes into detail how this scenario does not add up to Rick's noon to 1:30 timeline as being truthful. According to police, he said he sat on a bench after he stood on platform 1 of the Monon High Bridge. So, which bench did he sit on? Why didn't he and these 4 girls see each other for the hour that they were there, 12:30 to 1:30? If they took a 12:43 photo of Monon High Bridge and did not see Rick, that still leaves 45 minutes before he said he left at 1:30 after he sat on a bench. So what was he doing sitting on a bench for 45 minutes in 40-degree weather? If it was so cold that Rick had to wear a jacket, a head covering, and a hood, why would he want to be outside for 90 minutes? and sitting on a wooden bench for so long. Yet 4 girls who walked past all 6 benches twice never saw Rick sitting on one of them for the 60 minutes he and they were all there between 12:30 to 1:30. I look forward to hearing from this man, who the defense says is 100% innocent and has nothing to hide, explain what he was doing between noon to 1:30 and how he did not see the 4 girls. He did not see the adults who drove the vehicles parked at the Mears parking lot, and did not see Bridge Guy enter the trail or park in Rick's spot at CPS around the time that Rick was leaving. For people who believe that Rick is 100% innocent, how do you explain this? I think my video on this has over 20,000 views, and nobody has explained this. The jurors are going to debate this at the end of the trial, and it needs to be explained in order for Rick to be found innocent. This next topic is Bridge Guy on Platform 1 around 1:53 p.m. Pointing towards Rick's guilt, Rick told police in 2022 that he stood on Platform 1. His noon to 1:30 timeline would mean he stood there around 12:20 to look at fish. How long did he tell police he was on the bridge? Because the 4 girls took a photo and it is timestamped 12:43. For people who say Rick is innocent, they will say he was gone by 1:30, so that was not him at 1:53. Witness 4 described a male 20 to early 30s with poofy hair. Rick was 44 with short hair and said he was wearing a hood and possibly a head covering. Both Bridge Guy and Rick wore jeans, a blue jacket, and covered their heads. It is not known publicly where Witness 4 stood after she arrived at the posts near the start of the high bridge, how long she looked at Bridge Guy, if he turned to look at her, and whether she was wearing sunglasses or not using contacts or eyeglasses to help her vision. Rick and Bridge Guy both appear to wear small shoes, at least to me. Pointing towards Rick's guilt, on October 13th, 2022, in the police search of Rick's house, they took 2 pairs of boots. One was labeled Dirty Thoroughgood Boots, size 7.5 men's. The other was labeled as Dirty Black Boots, size 6.5 regular. It's unknown if those belong to Rick's wife. I made this comparison on the right. The left side of the photo obviously has Bridge Guy, and the right is a photo of Rick, zoomed in from a photo taken by a drone of the CVS in Delphi in summer of 2022, a few months before Rick was arrested, that appears to show a man resembling Rick walking outside. I'm sure there's a variety of opinions who think that maybe those do not match, and the photo comparison proves nothing. Next up is the 1:27 p.m. Hoosier Harvest Store video. The PCA stated the vehicle appears to match Rick's car, which was a 2016 black Ford Focus. Thank you to the nice person who made me aware of these photos of CVS taken in summer of 2022. I just showed you the one with Rick, and this other one seems to show Rick's car backed up at CVS. So at 1:27 p.m. on the day of the murders, police are saying a car matching this one here, which I believe is Rick's, was headed towards CPS and not away from it. There were 3 drivers referenced in the PCA. One at 2:10 said he saw a purple PT Cruiser or a small SUV. About 4 minutes later, Witness 4 was driving by and said she saw a car that reminded her of her father's, which was a 1965 Comet. 14 minutes after that, somebody else said he saw a car that resembled a smart car. I don't even know what to say. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable. Pointing towards Rick's innocence, the video from Hoosier Harvest Store has not been released publicly to show how it may compare to Rick's car. Rick said he left at 1:30, not arrived. Up next is another huge issue that I have. The April 22nd, 2019 press conference. Pointing towards Rick's guilt, he never came forward after this press conference in 2019 to say he was the person parked at CPS. Pointing towards Rick's innocence, you could say, he already talked to the police in 2017 and felt he did not need to contact them again, and they never contacted him again. There are a few aspects to this 2019 press conference that could indicate Rick is guilty. Law enforcement had their first highly publicized press conference in 2 years. The 2 biggest revelations by law enforcement were the sketch of the younger guy, and also Doug Carter asked the public to help identify the driver of a car parked at CPS because they thought that was a major clue to finally help solve who murdered 2 children near the trail Rick often went to.
We're seeking the public's help to identify the driver of a vehicle that was parked at the old CPS DCS welfare building in the city of Delphi that was abandoned on the east side of County Road 300 North next to the Hoosier Heartland Highway between the hours of noon to 5 on February 14th, 2017. If you were parked there or know who was parked there, please contact the officers at the command post.
In October 2022, Rick told police he parked next to an old building from noon to 1:30. There is only one old building near the start of the trails, and most people park near the start of the trail, not back up to the building. The 210 and 214 drivers both drew diagrams showing the car they saw was parked next to the old CPS building, like Rick said he did. However, he said he was gone by 1:30. People who think Rick is innocent may say he thought he parked at the old Farm Bureau building and did not know it was called CPS, so that's why he did not come forward in 2019. But the 2017 conservation officer narrative does not specify what Rick thought that old building he parked next to was called. The conservation officer wrote he parked at the old Farm Bureau building. It may be possible that in the 11 years Rick lived in Delphi, he never knew that old building he parked next to was formerly a CPS location. However, the 2019 press conference had to have been the talk of Delphi. Rick's co-workers at CVS must have been talking about it. I would think local married couples would be talking about the big update in the case. Did Rick ever ask anyone at work or his wife or his daughter, where is the CPS DCS welfare building that the head of the Indiana State Police was talking about? Doug Carter said it was next to Hoosier Heartland Highway. Rick knew he parked next to an old building 100 feet from the Hoosier Heartland Highway. The defense said that Rick called police in 2017 to help any way he could. Yet in 2019, after this press conference, Rick did not spend about 1 minute to drive 1 block from his job at CVS to the Carroll County Sheriff to see if he could help provide more details than his 2017 interview outside a grocery store with a conservation officer. Rick worked at CVS, where Liggett, Lesenby, and other officers probably shopped. Why didn't Rick approach them in 2019 or later and tell them he was the person parked there from noon to 1:30? Will law enforcement officers testify at the trial about their interactions with Rick after the murders? Did they talk to him about the murders, but he never brought up that he parked at CPS? At 1:27 p.m., a car resembling Rick's was captured by a Hoosier Hardware Store surveillance camera heading towards CPS. According to Rick, around the same time near 1:30, he pulled out of the unusual spot next to the old CPS building. A few minutes later, between 1:30 and 1:35, a group of 4 girls said a man matching the bridge guy from Libby's video entered the trail from the Freedom Bridge CPS area. Bridge guy would have had to park in the same unusual spot at CPS just as Rick was leaving in order for the 4 girls to see bridge guy soon after their 1:26 p.m. photo at bench 2. But Rick never said he saw someone pull in while he was leaving. It takes about 3 minutes to walk from CPS to the start of the trail where the 4 girls saw bridge guy. I still don't know for sure if Rick is guilty, but the timing of this does not add up to Rick telling the truth about being on the trail noon to 1:30. We don't know what Rick said about any other cars parked at CPS, but 3 witnesses at 210, 214, and 228 described the car they saw. Their descriptions were totally different, but included 210, a purple PT Cruiser or a small SUV type car, 214, a 1965 Comet, and 228, a smart car. This could point to Rick being innocent since none of the witnesses described a black 2016 Ford Focus. However, no one owning a car matching the 4 other descriptions came forward to tell police they were parked in the unusual spot at CPS. So who was parked there? Pointing towards Rick's innocence, another possible reason for Rick not coming forward could be that Doug Carter misspoke and said they were looking for someone who parked at CPS on February 14th, which was the day after the murders. It is unknown if Rick would have memorized the exact day of the murders being February 13th, so it could be said he knew he did not park there on the 14th, but a few minutes after Carter said the 14th, another officer corrected him and said it was the 13th, and it seems obvious Doug Carter would be asking about the day of the murders. The next section is confessions and incriminating statements. Things pointing towards Rick being guilty. On April 3rd, 2023, in the motion for leave of court to subpoena third-party records, McClelland wrote that at least 5 times Rick told his wife and mother incriminating statements on the phone the same day he met with the defense team. Richard M. Allen admits several times that he killed Abby and Libby. He admits several times within the phone call that he committed the offenses as charged, end quote. About a year later, on April 23, 2024, in the answer to motion to suppress statements, the prosecution stated, the suicide companions will testify for confessions and relevant statements against his own interest, which includes 16 correctional officers, 8 inmate companions, the Westville warden, mental health personnel, and Indiana State police officers. That's not good. Pointing towards Rick's innocence, it's unknown what he said and how his mental state may have contributed to his statements. Phone recordings from before April 3rd, 2023 will reveal a gradual mental decline when speaking with family who may have mentioned their concerns on the phone. The defense stated nearly all of the statements were between mid-March to June 2023. During this time, there also exists medical and psychiatric records suggesting Rick was in a state of psychosis. The prosecution said around this time, about 11 days after these confessions on the phone to his wife, on April 14th, 2023, Rick was evaluated by 2 psychiatrists and 1 psychologist to discuss his turn in behavior and a need for involuntary medication. It was determined he did not need involuntary medication or to be moved to another facility. Since that meeting, Rick began to eat and sleep, and his behavior began to return to what it was prior to making the admission on April 3rd. To quote Baldwin and Rosie's Frank's hearing memo, page 127, quote, "At some point in time, coincidences cease to be coincidences," end quote. I have a list of 3 coincidences here. Number 1, at 1:27 p.m., a few minutes before juvenile girls passed a man resembling Rick and Bridge Guy, a car resembling Rick's headed towards CPS. Coincidence number 2, Rick parked at CPS around noon and passed 3 girls near the Freedom Bridge entrance to the trail and did not say anything to them. 90 minutes later, another man dressed like Rick and Bridge Guy passed 4 girls in the same area and did not reply to the girl who said hi. Coincidence number 3, approximately 20 minutes after 4 girls passed Bridge Guy around 1:30, which would match up with the time it would have taken Rick to get from CPS to Freedom Bridge to Monon High Bridge if he parked around 1:28. Witness 4 saw a man matching Bridge Guy around 1:53 p.m. on Platform 1, the same small area of the long bridge that Rick said he stood on 90 minutes earlier watching fish when Deer Creek's water was muddy due to recent snow melting. Witness 4 described him as 20 to early 30s with no recollection of facial hair. It seems from her testimony, this male's hood was off if she saw his poofy hair and got a good look at his face, unless her vision was bad and Rick's head covering or hood was confused for poofy hair. Some final thoughts. People can complain about corruption, Odinus and EF's confessions, Kegan Kline and Ron Logan, the prosecution not turning over evidence, Judge Gull being mean by repeatedly denying motions filed by the defense daddies and the new defense mommy. But the goal of this trial is to analyze facts about what happened on the trail, bridge, and woods between noon on February 13th until the bodies were found around noon on February 14th. All of this other Delphi drama has nothing to do with proving whether or not Richard Allen was Bridge Guy at 2:13 p.m. The evidence and testimony by people on the trail and various experts will hopefully clarify once and for all who was Bridge Guy. So, if you were on the jury, what would your verdict be? If you had to vote today based on current evidence, would you vote guilty or innocent for Richard Allen? Today, I would vote innocent because I have not seen enough evidence to send Rick to prison for the rest of his life, but there is a lot of evidence that will be presented for the first time at the trial. Overall, I am leaning more towards Rick being guilty instead of innocent because there are a lot of questions that need to be answered by Rick and his attorneys. Why has Rick made incriminating statements to approximately 30 people over a 3-month period? What did he say? Was there a group of 3 girls at noon? What will be the testimony of the 4 girls, witness 4, and the woman who passed a man on the road at 3:57 p.m.? Does the 127 video show a car that headed to CPS that exactly matches Rick's car? What does Rick's phone data show? What does Rick's car data show? What does Libby's phone data show? Did Abby have a phone and what did it show? There are still many things to be revealed in this case, so I don't think anyone should be making a final decision before the end of the trial. Based on the statements of law enforcement and McClelland in his filings, I would not be surprised if they present enough evidence that changes my mind to vote guilty. But I'm waiting until all evidence has been presented before hopefully finally being able to resolve in my mind who was Bridge Guy. I'm sure I forgot certain things that point towards Rick's guilt or innocence, so please write in the comments below anything that you feel like I missed. And thanks for watching.